Okay, I think today we'll just look at environment, right? So the way we look at environment, we'll split it into 4 parts, the whole topics. Okay, so we'll look at international institutions. International institutions include IUCN, RED plus, climate action and protocols. For example, there is something called the Convention on Biodiversity. You have multiple protocols called Nagoya Protocol, Cartagena Protocol, etc. All of these are different protocols. So we'll look at those. This is the first segment of how we will look at it. The second one that we look at is national parks, reserves, and concepts related to these national parks and biosphere reserves, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. We'll look at these. Then the next one that we'll look at is pollution and related topics. In the exam, if you just open the paper, most of what you have is related to either pollution, international institutions, national parks. So most of the concepts that you see in these comes through the acts, laws and rules. There are approximately 10 important acts, laws and rules. So if you have studied a bit right now, you can just tell me what are these acts that you can think of. Which are the important acts? Wildlife Protection Act, one of the most important. Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So we'll be discussing that. Next, anything else? EPA, Environment Protection Act 1986, very important. Next. So we have multiple, right? We spoke about Convention on Biological Diversity. So that required that every nation in the world pass, or every nation that was part of that convention, that they had to pass a national legislation. So India also has one Biological Diversity Act that is of 2002. That is also very important. So relating to pollution, for example, you have Air Pollution Act, Water Pollution Act, you have Hazardous Waste Management Act. All of these are important acts. So what students don't realize is that most of the questions in the exam have come from these acts only. When I explain the Wildlife Protection Act, you will understand that it has so much information that all of these questions are coming from that act only. Like if there are questions relating to wildlife sanctuaries, questions relating to national parks. In 2023, I think there was one question related to community reserves. There was one question related to community reserves. Again, that has come from Wildlife Protection Act only. So it's a very important act. So the multiple acts like this, that also we will cover. So this is the fourth important. Then terminologies we will try and explain, right? So what kind of terminologies? For example, let's say carbon sequestration. And then we say carbon sink. What is the difference between the two? These are the things that we will explore later on, that is terminology. So entire environment you can cover in these. When we say national parks, reserves and concept, it also includes the flora and fauna. For example, if you are talking about, let's say, a threatened species like a tiger, right? So that is included in this discussion, okay? And again, when we talk about Wildlife Protection Act, we are also going to talk about the schedules. There are 6 schedules to the Wildlife Protection Act. So each of the schedule has different level of protection that is being given to the flora and fauna, right? Mainly fauna. Wildlife is fauna, right? Okay. So let's just start by trying to understand and defining certain topics. The first question obviously we'll ask is, what is environment? Because we are going to study environment and biodiversity. Everything is going to be around those topics. So what is environment and what is biodiversity? The first one we'll answer is, what is environment? Okay. There are multiple terms before that, right? There are multiple terms and it gets very confusing. I'll just give you an example. For example, now these are the terms that you can look at. Okay. For example, I talk about a biosphere. How is a biosphere different from environment? This is a question you have to answer. How is a biome different from a biosphere? How is an ecosystem different from all the three? What is a community? These are probably easier to answer. Community, population, individual. Because you use that in your everyday conversations, right? Community, population, individual. But these terms, ecosystem, biome, biosphere and environment, these you don't use every day. Now, you may use the word environment very casually, but these are technical terms when we are studying the actual subject. Okay, so we will define that. So keeping these terms also in mind, now we will start defining what is environment. Once we define what is environment, we'll start defining those terms also, and then we will compare it. Like what is the difference between these terms, right? The first definition that we can look at environment is, environment includes all biotic components and abiotic components within a certain region. Okay, biotic and abiotic. What is bios? Bios means life. Bios means life. So biotic means all things with life. It can be a small insect, it can be a complex human being. Everything is included under biotic. It can be terrestrial, that is terrestrial on the land. It can be on land, it can be marine, it can be aerial. Aerial means in the sky. So any of these, everything included is biotic. Any life, if something has life, it is biotic. No life, abiotic. Whenever we have a before a term, it is the reverse of it. So anything that, so for example, now let's say we consider the world as the environment now, right? The entire world with all its biotic and abiotic components becomes the environment. So we understood what is biotic component, right? Biotic component means anything with life is biotic component. Now if we say abiotic component, what is included? Can we just have some examples? Right, here for example in this classroom we'll start saying table, chair and so on. Now if you just start going outside the classroom, what can you see? Sun, soil, all of these are also abiotic components. These are abiotic components that are enabling life, that is biotic components. Abiotic components that are enabling biotic components or life. So the sum total of everything that you put together is environment. Nothing is left out. No thing is left out and no life is left out. So everything put together is environment. I think this much is clear. Now it will start getting a little complicated because we are going to introduce more terms, right? So when we say it includes all interactions, including physical, chemical and biological interactions. So physical interaction is what we are having right now, right? This is a physical interaction. What is the example of a chemical reaction? Maybe in this space, let's say, what is the example of a chemical reaction? In the tube light, LED, right? We have LED tube lights here. LED is an example of a chemical reaction. What is happening there? It is emitting light because electrons are coming and emitting light. So that's a chemical reaction. So that is also included. Now, let's say what is a biological interaction can be this also, right? It can be an example of physical and biological interaction, but this is the perfect example of a biological interaction. Now, another example of physical interaction can be any two physical components. That is also a physical interaction, right? Now, let's look at the next one. The next one is biosphere, okay? So, we'll come from the top to the bottom, okay? Okay. So, now what is a biosphere? Just split the word. So what I will do during this course is that I will try to explain how to think about words, right? Because in the exam you will keep getting new words and we cannot cover all words while teaching. So I will teach you how to think also. So it makes it easier for you in the exam. For example, biosphere. How will you think about biosphere? Split the word. Bios. Bios means life. Sphere means area of influence. Sphere always means area of influence. Okay. So what is biosphere? Area of influence of life. So if there is life, that is biosphere. If there is no life, then that is not included in biosphere. That's simple. Okay. Now let's take some example. We are at a, let's say we are at a zoo. Okay. So what, and I'll define something in the zoo for you. Okay. A man is standing in front of a cage and there is a tiger inside the cage and the tiger is eating the meat. There are some lights that is focused on the tiger so that the tiger is the center of attraction. There are some cages. there are some monkeys running around in the trees. Okay, just imagine this scene. What part of it is environment and what part of it is biosphere? The sum total of everything is environment. What is biosphere in this? No, the man, anything that has life in this scenario. What has life in this scenario? The man, the tiger, the monkey. They have life. So this is the biosphere within that environment. Understood? The environment will include the cage, the meat that it is eating, the LED lights that are there, the cages that are there, the trees, everything. Everything is included in environment. But biosphere only includes what has life in it. So for example, in this classroom, if I were to say what is the biosphere within this classroom, I mean, we're just trying to understand the concept, right? So all the students here, me, the cockroaches, lizards that may be hiding somewhere, all of this put together is the biosphere with them. But when you say environment, everything is included, right? The cameras that are recording, the tables, chairs, everything put together is environment. Okay, so I hope the distinction is clear. So biosphere means only bio is included. The next term that we have is biome. Again, biome, it has bio in it. That means it includes only components with life. But the definition will get a little more complicated when we look at biome. Okay, so I'll start with by giving an example. Okay, I'll give two examples. One is, let's say, a rainforest. Which is the example of a rainforest here? A rainforest or a deciduous forest or any kind of a forest system. You look at Western Ghats, right? Western Ghats are almost rainforests only because you have rainfall throughout the year and there is some drizzling going on at all points in time, right? Another example of a rainforest is which one? The Amazon rainforest. The Amazon rainforest is the biggest rainforest in the world. Okay, where is Amazon rainforest? Which continent? South America. South America, in which country? Brazil. Very good. Majorly in Brazil. So it also has which river? The Amazon river. And the Amazon river has, is the longest or the most voluminous? Longest. It is not the longest. Yeah, it is the largest. So you should be very careful. Largest is different, longest is different. Which is the longest one? Nile. Nile is the longest one. That's in Africa. The river with the most volume is Amazon. Okay. So we'll talk about Amazon a little bit more. So a biome means some kind of a smaller ecosystem. For example, that is a tropical rainforest, or it can be a desert. A desert by itself is a biome. Okay, a desert is a biome. So you are understanding the kind of things that I am talking about. These are places that are found around the world. For example, there is a rainforest in South America. There are rainforests in Congo, right? Congo has amazing rainforests, right? Because it's also one of the last remaining places where you will find the mountain gorillas, right? Mountain gorillas. I don't know if you have seen videos of mountain gorillas. So last remaining places of wild mountain gorillas. So the rainforest exists in Africa. Rainforest exists in South America. Rainforest also exists in India. They are all very similar. Characterized by the same things, right? Rainforests around the world are characterized by the same thing. Continuous rainfall throughout the year, thick vegetation. So this is true across the world. If you look at the deserts are similar. If you go to Sahara Desert, it's dry, it's very hot, it's very humid. And if you try to look at the flora, what do you find in deserts? Shrubs, cactus, thorny bushes. Same is true in India. If you go to Gobi Desert, do you know where Gobi Desert is? China, right? So, be it China, be it Africa, be it India, it is the same, right? The desert, the characteristics of the desert does not change. It is going to be hot, it is going to be dry, there are only going to be thorny scrubby bushes, correct? And if you look at the fauna, what kind of fauna exists in desert? Huh? Camel. Okay, camel, but not in all deserts, but camel, yes. Next, if you look at lizards, for example, lizards, rats, lizards are very, very common. Camels don't exist in all, actually. If you look at Australia, snakes is a fantastic example. Fauna is there. The desert is teeming with life. Everybody thinks there is no fauna in the desert, but that's not true. The desert is teeming with life. If you just look at beetles, insects, thousands of insects within the desert ecosystem. I'm using the word ecosystem. Why? I will come back and talk. Even though it is a biome, I'm using the word ecosystem within a biome. Why? I will come and explain that also, so that is clear. Because ecosystem will define next. He's saying desert is a biome, but why is he calling it a ecosystem? I will explain that also. Okay. So biome means one kind of a unit that is present across the world and it is similar. Understood, no? This is a biome. Best examples are tropical rainforests, deserts, etc. Okay. Now next we'll come to ecosystem. Okay. Think of ecosystem as a mini, okay, so I think we have covered this. Biosphere is aerial, terrestrial, marine. Biome is associated with a major vegetation type found in similar climatic belts, right? A major vegetation type, that is, example is tropical evergreen forest, or it can be tundra. For example, in Himalaya you have tundra forests, and you have tundra forests in Siberia, Russia. You know, no? The biggest tundra forests are found in Siberia. They are the same. What kind of vegetation do you find there? You find tall trees like pine, conifers. So this is the same vegetation that you find in upper reaches of Himalayas also. So it is a major vegetation type in similar climatic belts. Correct? No. North of the equator and south of the equator, when you go, you will find, for example, at 20° north and 20° south of the equator, you will find similar vegetation types. Correct or wrong? Right. If you go 75° north and 75° south, what do you find? You find Arctic and Antarctic. Both are frigid zones. Okay. Now let's say I go 5° north and 5° south, or 10° north, 10° south. What do I get? That is the equatorial type of climate. Correct. If I go 23 up, 23 down, what do I get? Tropics. We get tropics. So it is the same. That is the reason that India, let's say, is around 20° north of equator. If you look at Brazil, it is 20° south of equator. Both of us have rainforests and similar environments. Got it, no? So that's what. So biome is associated with the major vegetation type found in similar climatic belts. It is found across the world. A biome is found across the world. Now, when we say ecosystem, the best way to talk about an ecosystem is to say that it is a mini environment by itself. A mini environment by itself. So when I say environment, what is the immediate thing that it comes to your mind? Biotic plus abiotic. That is the immediate thing that comes to your mind. When I say environment, what comes? Biotic plus abiotic. It's not just bio. So an ecosystem consists of both biotic and abiotic factors. Then how is an ecosystem different from the environment? Can we guess? Okay. I'll give you an example of an ecosystem. An example of ecosystem is what? Let's say a pond ecosystem. We say an ecosystem of a pond or an ecosystem of a lake. Okay, this is what we are saying. This is an example of an ecosystem. So now we have to start distinguishing the words with respect to the scale. Scale. You understand scale, no? With respect to the scale. When we look at a very small system, right? Like a pond, a lake, or it could even be slightly larger, like a desert, I said, a desert ecosystem. So that can also be an ecosystem by itself. If I say biome, it only includes what? But when I say ecosystem, it includes the sand also, because it includes the abiotic factors. Clear, huh? Is the distinction clear? Or do you have doubts? You have doubts, you can ask me. Okay. So ecosystem. Ecosystem means a mini environment by itself. Now when I say a lake ecosystem, let's try to list out everything that is there or that makes a lake. What are the things that make a lake? Water, fish, frogs, grass, soil, next, crabs, shells, okay, next, stones, next, keep going. No, I'm looking for specific answers, that's why I'm, Clay, okay, again, soil, clay, okay, next. Okay, so how do the plants grow? Through what? Through light, sunlight. Sun is also a part of the lake ecosystem. That is why I was asking for you to list it out. That's what I'm trying to get. Anything that helps it grow, and anything, if it was absent from the ecosystem, will affect the ecosystem, has to be a part of that ecosystem. Okay. Without the sun, can vegetation grow there? For example, for fish also, within the lake system, they need aquatic plants to eat. Correct. So without the sun, can they survive? No. So the sun becomes a part of the lake ecosystem. Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. So a lake ecosystem will have what? It will have the sun, it will have the water itself that is part of the lake, which you guys didn't answer, and then you will have soil as part of it, right? And you will have multiple aquatic plants. You said grass. Grass is if there is an island on the lake, that can be a part of a lake ecosystem, right? Lakes have islands also within them, and that can be a part of lake ecosystem. For example, in Bangalore itself, if you go to Hebbal Lake, I don't know if you have seen, there are islands within the Hebbal Lake ecosystem, right? There are islands there. So all of this put together becomes an ecosystem, a lake ecosystem. The same thing is true for pond also. You can have a pond ecosystem. An ecosystem is a mini environment. A mini environment. Okay. Environment by itself means everything, including the planet. Everything. Everything is environment. Scale. Right. So ecosystem is a smaller unit of the environment. Okay. So I think we have 3 more terms that we need to look at, right? I think we need to look at community, population, individual. So now instead of a top-down approach, let's go from the bottom. Okay. Okay. What is an individual? Individual is the smallest organism of the entire system. That means I am an individual, you are an individual. Clear. Next, what is population? Group of species will become community. Single organism, single species of organism will become population. For example, we say population of humans. We say population of humans. So humans is a single species, right? Humans is a single species. Next, if we go, we say community. Correct. Community includes group of species. That's all. For example, we have dogs outside. We are humans. There are cats. Dogs, cats, humans put together forms a community. Okay. So that is a community. For example, here in the image, we are looking at a forest community. Forest community means different species. Like you have the gaur, you have monkeys, owls, monkeys and rabbits, everything put together is a community. When you say population, it's a population of deer because it's a single species. When you say individual, it means one deer. Only one species, one deer. Okay. So I think all of these terms have been covered, right? Right from environment, biosphere, biome, ecosystem, community, population, individual. Okay. Something critical is that you have to learn to understand how to derive meaning out of words. That becomes very important because in the exam you may have a combination of 2 words. So you have to be able to understand what it means. If they say desert ecosystem, what does it mean? Desert biome, what does it mean? While answering the question, when you say desert biome, consider only the living component of it. When you say desert ecosystem, consider biotic and abiotic components when you are answering the question. So thinking about these terms becomes very important. Okay, no? So even now tomorrow if I say what is a bioreserve, right? You have all heard of bioreserves? Bioreserves you have heard? Okay. What is a bioreserve? Can you answer using this explanation? Bioreserve. What is it? Try answering. Let's start with the terms. Split the terms. Bio. Life. So only things that are life are protected. Reserve means what? An area that is protected. Correct? Reserve means protected. Bioreserve means an area where life is protected. That is all. That is what a bioreserve means. We will look at bioreserves also, and when I explain about bioreserves, you will understand how simple the definition is because you understand the term. Okay, no? Okay. But you can't do it for everything. But for most of the technical terms, you can do it. Okay. Okay. So one of the most important acts that we look at is the Wildlife Protection Act of 1971. Okay. So you keep hearing words like national parks, wildlife sanctuaries. What else have you heard? Biosphere reserves. You have heard what? Community reserves. You have heard Ramsar sites is something else, but it doesn't come under this. Ramsar sites also protected sites. That comes under international conventions. In the beginning we spoke that we have international convention, national. So that comes under international conventions, but that is also a protected site only. So like national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, community reserves, everything is through the Wildlife Protection Act of 1971 only. Okay, we will look at that a bit later. Okay, so now the first one we'll look at is national parks. Okay, now when we say national parks, what comes to your mind? Give me two examples of any two national parks that you know. Karnataka, Bannerghatta National Park, Bangalore. Next. Okay, that is also a national park. Okay, so when you say these are national parks, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say national parks? Right, there is a specific context in which these areas are protected. Okay, when you say national parks, what is allowed, what is not allowed? How is it different from a wildlife sanctuary? How is it different from a biosphere reserve? I think all of these have to be looked at. So if you say national park, national parks, the facility to make a national park is brought about from the Wildlife Protection Act of 1970. The same is true for wildlife sanctuary also. These two, that is national parks and wildlife sanctuary, are from, yes, the statutory basis is given by the Wildlife Protection Act of 1970. You need to know this. For example, there may be a question in the prelims that asks which of the following get their statutory sanction from the Wildlife Protection Act of 1971. In that case, you have to say both national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. Okay. Now we will come to regulations. Okay, we will come to regulating national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. Can anybody go into a national park? No. Why? Okay, Bannerghatta National Park is there. Can you just walk inside? Yes or no? Restrictions are there. What kind of restrictions? Huh? Correct. Right. So one of our main problems is that we want to protect that environment, and people may harm the flora and fauna, not just fauna. People may harm flora and fauna. Whenever we talk about environments or national parks, I'll come to wildlife sanctuary. Then you'll understand why I am talking about flora and fauna when I'm talking about national parks. Okay. A national park is a designated area, okay, that looks to conserve both flora and fauna. When you look at wildlife sanctuaries, then there is a specific purpose for that wildlife sanctuary. It can be for particular species of flora, or it can be for particular species of fauna, or it can be for a combination of species of flora and fauna. But it is not a holistic approach. It is meant to conserve some parts of that environment and to conserve some parts of that environment. This is the most important distinction between a national park and a wildlife sanctuary. Okay. So when you look at national parks are controlled very, very strictly, right? You cannot just go in to a national park because forest guards are there, they will not let you in. You cannot collect minor forest produce from national parks. Human settlements are not allowed inside national parks. No hunting inside national parks. Okay, and very strict control by the government, both state government and central government, both have control on it. Okay, for example, you have IFOS office, that is Indian Forest Service officers. They also work on it. At the same time, you have state forest rangers and state forest officers. They also take care of this national park. So it is combined control only. Now, national parks, when you look at it as a geographical entity, okay, the limits have been set once. The limits cannot be changed that easily. Okay, the state government has to pass a resolution saying that we are going to change the boundaries of a national park. In case of a wildlife sanctuary, it is easier to do. You don't need a resolution by the state government. The state government can just have some rules and it can change the boundaries of a wildlife sanctuary. This is a very critical importance. In the prelims, they may ask which of the following can be changed without a resolution from the state government. And you can have wildlife sanctuary and national parks or community reserves as options. So you should know which can be done. Okay, so this is a very important aspect of it. Now, when you look at this, right, national parks are more strictly regulated compared to wildlife sanctuaries. Activities like grazing of livestock is also not allowed. Like even if there are tribal communities and they want to take it for grazing, it is not allowed. Why? Can you guess why? Why grazing of livestock is not allowed? Why collection of minor forest produce is not allowed? Why harvesting timber is not allowed? In a way, it is not different if you consider the definition as a whole environment. So a national park is meant to conserve both flora and fauna, and it has a holistic approach. Now let's say you let people inside and they start grazing inside. So there are so many species of smaller sized plants that these people can graze on, right? The sheep will graze on. Then that is a loss to that environment. So you want to protect it to such a degree that you want none of that. But there are animals inside that environment. For example, you have deer. A deer is there inside a national park, a free range national park. Let's say Anshi National Park. Anshi National Park is where? Karnataka, Dandeli. Okay, that is one of the most beautiful national parks. Okay, now that's a free range national park. Okay, you have lots of deer, you have tigers, leopards, you have black panthers also in Anshi National Park. Now that is an ecosystem by itself. It's a mini environment, right? Yes or no? It's an ecosystem by itself. So the deer that is grazing there, that is okay. But you should not bring sheep from outside and get it to graze. Now let's say you get 100 sheep and it starts grazing. You know how much it can eat and how quickly it can eat. So grazing is not allowed because it will change the structure. How it will change, that also I will discuss. Okay, we will talk about the top predator and the importance of top predator in an environment. I'll talk about it very clearly. Okay, so I think we have covered all of this. Okay, and changes in the way the national park is set up is not allowed unless the change is for the betterment of the wildlife there. Now, wildlife sanctuary I already explained in comparison with national park. So, here wildlife sanctuary is primarily intended to protect. I just underline this. So, protect a specific species. This is the major difference. For example, give me an example of a wildlife sanctuary. Famous, so hundreds are there. Bhadra Reserve, it is a wildlife sanctuary also. Okay, Bhadra is a tiger reserve. Okay, simple example. Well, let's not get confused because Bhadra is also a tiger reserve. You have Project Tiger, will get confused. There is something that is purely a wildlife sanctuary, like Rangantittu. You have heard of Rangantittu? Where is Rangantittu? Yeah, Srirangpatna, right? Next to Mysore. It's a what? It's a bird sanctuary. But is Rangantittu only famous for birds? No, I mean anybody who has gone to Rangantittu will know it is not famous just for birds. It is famous for the Kaveri. It is famous for the crocodiles. You have freshwater crocodiles in Rangantittu. I mean hundreds and hundreds of crocodiles, not one, two. Hundreds and hundreds of crocodiles. Are crocodiles not important? Very important, because crocodiles are also protected under which act? Crocodiles are protected under which act? I have told this 3 times today already. Which act are we talking about? Wildlife Protection Act. See, don't get confused, okay? Everything is protected under which act? Wildlife Protection Act. You just have different schedules. Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 schedules. That also we'll talk about. So, if tomorrow somebody asks you under which act is the tiger protected? Wildlife Protection Act. For sure, you don't have to think twice at all. Elephant, Wildlife Protection Act, because everything is protected in the same act but different schedules. What those schedules are, we'll see. So this is the most important distinction between a wildlife sanctuary and. So if you took at a Rangantittu bird sanctuary, it's mainly for conservation of that environment for the bird. And because migratory birds come from all across the world and it comes there. So we don't want to harm it. That's why you have wildlife sanctuaries. Specific species of flora or fauna. Understood, no? Okay. Now, now certain rights can be allowed here, such as grazing. Okay. Because here we are not considering the entire environment as being protected. We are only focusing on certain species of flora or fauna. For example, now birds are being protected. If I let some sheep to graze on the grassland there, it is not going to harm the birds. I mean, overgrazing may, because the worms may die out, all that is there, not that it may not. But okay, you can still allow it to graze there, because it's not directly harming it to such a great degree. If, however, the people there who are in charge feel that, oh, grazing is causing a problem, they can stop it also. They have the power to do so. Again, here the boundaries can be altered quite easily. You don't need a resolution from the state government and so on and so forth. Now, these two, that is national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, these are listed in the Wildlife Protection Act. But you will come across some other terms also, like what? Protected area, biosphere reserve. A biosphere reserve is not mentioned in the Wildlife Protection Act. When we say protected area can be anything, any area that is protected. Is a wildlife sanctuary a protected area? Yes. Yes, absolutely. You are protecting something. You are protecting what? Some species of flora and fauna you are protecting. Is national park protected area? Yes, because you are protecting the entire environment. Is a community reserve a protected area? Yes. What are you trying to protect there? That I will explain. Okay, I'll explain that. Okay, so it's a protected area is a generic term. Any area that is protected can be called a protected area. Don't get confused. Okay, because these are terms that you will read in articles, that will come in the question. You should know what exactly it stands for. Next, biosphere reserves. Where does the concept of biosphere reserves come from? We said the concept of national parks come from. We said concept of wildlife and everything comes from wildlife. Now, where is the concept of biosphere reserve coming from? It is coming from international bodies. Okay, so I think in 1948 you had something called MAB. MAB is Man and the Biosphere. Okay, this was brought into the picture by UNESCO. Now you may question, what is UNESCO? Does anybody know the full form? United Nations Economic, Social and Cultural Organization. Okay, that is UNESCO. Now UNESCO means United Nations Economic, Social and Cultural Organization. What does it have to do with biospheres? It's an economic, social, cultural organization. Correct? No? What does it have to do with biospheres? Okay, so the answer has two parts to it. Okay, one, this came in 1948, the map, that is Man and the Biosphere. So at such an early stage in UN's existence, they did not have specialized agencies. For example, now you have something called UNEP. What is UNEP? Environment Program, correct. So now we have that, but in 1948 it does not exist. So everything that came under UNESCO. Why under UNESCO? Again, the second part of the answer is also there. Sustainable development. Whenever we talk about international institutions, one theme will always be present. What is it? Sustainable development. Sustainable development, that is sustainable economic development, sustainable social development, sustainable cultural development, by making sure the environment is not spoiled. That is why it is coming under UNESCO. Sustainable economic, social and cultural development by making sure the environment is also not degraded. Shall we look at an example? How? Okay. Now let's say Dandeli. We'll go back to Dandeli only, right? Anshi National Park. We'll go there. Beautiful forest, beautiful timber forest, beautiful rivers. Kali Nadi flows through the Anshi National Park. Very pristine forests. Forests also means what? Lot of natural resources. Correct? Lot of natural resources, lot of minerals. Natural resources includes timber, by the way. Correct? No? Lots and lots of timber are available. Now, if you have timber, what is the best factory to put up? Paper. Paper uses lots of timber, and you need lots of fresh water for it. Why? Because you need to put the pollutant somewhere, which is very, very bad thing to do. You have to treat the pollutants, make sure the pollutants are not poisonous, and only then release. But in our country, they are not doing like that. So they always look at paper factories near rivers, where they can dump the waste. Very bad practice. We shouldn't do it. It is illegal also, but that's how it's being done. Now let's say, for the development of a small community or a small region or a small village or a small town, what is necessary? Business is necessary. Economy, money has to come in. Greater salaries leads to greater lifestyle or a better lifestyle, reduction in poverty, everything, right? Now, if you need to have industries, then like let's say a paper industry, and this will be true for any industry. I'm just taking paper industry as an example. What will the paper industry do? It will set up the industry near to where natural resources are available. In this case, where? Near to the forests. Let's forget that Anshi is a national park for a moment. Forget there is no national park. It's a forest. Now they will want to set it up where? Right in the forest. Correct? No, they will build one road, put it right next to a river, and the forest is there. I will cut the trees, take it into the factory, produce paper, sell it. Now the factory is giving employment to people. So the factory is necessary, no doubt. We cannot. No, but what is happening to the forest? You are cutting down trees relentlessly, and you are polluting the water by letting the wastes out directly into the river. Correct? No. Apart from this, there are other problems also, right? Because things that are not natural to the environment, like trucks are coming and going, roads are being built, people are coming, people are dirtying that environment. All these problems are there. Correct? Now, does that mean we don't put a factory there? We have to put a factory because people need jobs. At the same time, we can't destroy forests. And this is where the concept of sustainable development comes in. Okay, no? Whenever you have some international institution, this is always a theme. Sustainable development. Everything is linked to that. Okay. So that's where the concept of biosphere reserves also came in. That, okay, you create whatever you want, but don't destroy the environment completely. Make sure that the important components of that environment are left alone and make it sustainably. Don't cut, if there are 100 trees, don't cut 100 trees. Cut 10 trees. You use it for your development and then start replanting them. Cut 10 more trees, replant. Cut 10 more trees, replant. So this is the idea of sustainable development. Okay. Biosphere reserves also came under MAB, that is Man and the Biosphere Program of UNESCO. So across the world, it has been set up, not just in India. When we are talking about wildlife sanctuaries and national parks, we are only talking about India. But when we are talking about MAB, we are talking worldwide. Okay. So there are over 700 biosphere reserves across the world in 120 countries under MAB program of UNESCO. Now the same thing if you have to compare with respect to national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, how many national parks are there in India and how many biosphere reserves also will come, how many are there? How many national parks in India? Just any idea? 106 now, 106. Recently it's got added, 106 national parks. How many wildlife sanctuaries? She thinks it's a lot, she's doing like this. How many are there? 567 now, okay, 567 wildlife sanctuaries. But if you look at biosphere reserves, there are only 18 biosphere reserves in India and only 12 of them are under MAB, okay, that is under the Man and Biosphere Program. Only 18 biosphere reserves, 12 under MAB. So we'll not look at the list and all now, okay, you can go, everything is available on Wikipedia, it's available on our app also. Just go Google national parks in India, you will get the whole list on Wikipedia. It's also available on the app. You can see the entire list. You can see what rivers are flowing through each of these national parks. You have to see what is the most important flora and fauna in these national parks. All that is important. There is not a lot to teach there. Okay, it's just a table. You have to learn the table. There is no other go, no magic. Just learn the table. Here we will just focus on concepts. Biosphere reserve. Now these means they preserve genetic diversity in representative ecosystems, and there is a holistic conservation. National park was strictest. Next came wildlife sanctuaries, which was a little less strict. Biospheres are even less stricter, but the focus is larger in case of a biosphere reserve. How I will talk about it? Just after 5 minutes, I'll talk about it. Okay. So, holistic conservation split into different zones. There are 3 different zones in a biosphere reserve. What are the 3 different zones? You would have core area. You would have heard core area of the forest, core area of the reserve. You would have heard this core area. That is at the very center of the reserve. What is the next one? Buffer zone, right? So you have something like a core area, then you have a buffer zone, right? So this is core area, this is a buffer zone, and then you have one more zone. What is this? There are 3 zones. The first one is the core zone, the second one is the buffer zone. What is the third one? Transition zone. Okay, you're transitioning out from the biosphere reserve into society. Understood? No? So that is a transition zone. So you have 3 components, that is the core area, the buffer area and the transition zone. So what is the significance of each of these? That is what we have to understand. What is the significance of core area? What is the significance of the buffer area? What is the significance of transition area? We have to look at it with examples. Core area means nothing is allowed there. You cannot harm any part of that reserve. Okay, you cannot harm the flora, you cannot harm the fauna. In the core reserve, it's very pristine. You cannot touch it. That is core. It is meant to preserve, like a national park. You cannot do anything there. Everything is preserved. Next, you have a buffer zone. That is similar to a wildlife sanctuary. We may allow some grazing in it. We may allow collection of some minor forest produce in it. We may allow some settlements also. For example, tribal people have existed in small hamlets. Literally, if you go to some place like an Anshi National Park, Anshi Forest, not just the national park, you will see that there are villages with only 2 houses, only 2 huts. That's all. The entire village is just 2 huts. So these may be allowed to stay in the end of the buffer zone, not nearer to the core area, but somewhere, let's say in this area, you may still allow some kind of settlements. If you keep going inside, you can allow grazing. Here you can allow minor forest produce. So as you come outside, more things will be allowed. Transition area will have settlements, human settlements, communities that have lived near that space for a very long amount of time. You can also have some agriculture there. In transition area, you can also have agriculture. And you can also have small cottage industries there, like handlooms. If you want, you can have these also in the transition area. So here you will not have urbanization, right? It is still a very rural forest economy there. Rural forest economy. The rural economy can come after this. After this, it is rural economy. Understood? No? That is the difference. Core, buffer and transition zone. I'll talk about this again. In 2 minutes, I'll talk about this again. But before that, there are 2 important terms that we have left out. These also come under the purview of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1971. And these have been asked recently also in prelims. Okay. So there are 2 kinds of reserves. Apart from your national park and wildlife sanctuary, there is conservation reserves and community reserves. What is the difference between the 2? Conservation reserves and community reserves. What is the difference between the 2? Now, conservation reserves means the land is owned by the government. Now, when it comes to national park, wildlife sanctuaries, we have no doubt that land is government land only. Nobody can own a national park. Nobody can own a wildlife sanctuary. Nobody can own a biosphere reserve by themselves. They cannot own. So here, but something will come up. So that's why I'm talking about it. It is entirely owned by the government. It is generally adjacent to national parks or wildlife sanctuaries. So when I'm talking about, let's say, the transition zone, think of the transition zone of a biosphere reserve. That is what a community or a conservation reserve can be. The transition zone, it will be there. So this can act as buffer zones or migration corridors. Migration corridors again in another term for transition zone. Migration literally means transition from one place to another. So it can be either in the buffer zone or migration corridors. So these are called conservation reserves. Even though the Wildlife Protection Act does not talk about bioreserves, it talks about all the parts of a bioreserve. What are the 3 parts of a bioreserve? Core zone, buffer zone, transition zone. An example of a core zone can be a national park. An example of a buffer zone can be a wildlife sanctuary. An example of a transition zone can be a conservation reserve. Okay. Also community reserve. I'll talk about what is that. Okay. Conservation reserves are created by the state government in consultation with the local communities there. Like I said, these are not proper forests. Local communities like tribal people may exist or small villages may exist. So in consultation with them, these are created. The conservation reserves are created. Now, who is it managed by? Right, when we spoke about wildlife sanctuaries and national parks, we said it is managed by whom? Mainly the state government, but the central government also has a say because it is deputing the IFOS officers there. Now, in the case of, let's say, conservation reserves, it is managed by a committee of Conservation Reserve Management Committee. This includes the local people plus forest department, that is state forest department. Both of them together will form this Conservation Reservation Management Committee, that is Community Reserve Management Committee. Both of them together will manage this area. Clear, no? No doubts. This was called Conservation Reserve, CR. Next we will look at community reserves. What is a community reserve? In case of a community reserve, let's say there is some private land that is owned, right? Many people own tea estates. I don't know if you have seen tea estates or coffee estates. If you go to Chikmagalur in Karnataka, you will see coffee estates. People own entire hills. Even today, people own entire hills, right? They own 3-4 hills of coffee estates. But these coffee estates are private land. Correct? Coffee estates are owned by some people, private land. But the coffee estates are in the transition zone of, let's say, a national park or a wildlife sanctuary. Correct? You would have seen, no, in so many videos you would have seen in Assam and all, it's very common for elephants to come into tea estates. You would have seen so many videos. Elephants come off into tea estates. Man-animal conflict, you would have seen in so many places. But these tea estates, coffee estates are owned by whom? Private people. So let's say now an elephant comes into a tea estate, can you just kill the elephant because it is in your private property? You cannot kill it. So man-animal conflict has to be reduced. How do you do that? That is where community reserves come in. When you have community reserves, what the government is going to do is, it is going to take private lands, it is going to take government land, it is going to take the buffer zone of a sphere, or it may take a wildlife sanctuary. Everything it will put together, it will form one committee and it will say manage this area, including the private lands. So community reserve is the only place where you are managing private land also. Got it, no? Okay. Okay, this was 1971, not 1948, 1971. MAB, Man and Biosphere, this program that we saw, it was 1971 and created 19. So the way it talks about is combines natural sciences and social sciences. I think for us these definitions are very important. What is natural science and what is social science? Natural science means physics, chemistry, biology. Social science, history, civics, all these are sociology, all these are social sciences. Did you understand the difference? Natural science means what? Physics, chemistry, biology, these are all natural sciences. Social sciences are man-made. That is what social sciences. Natural sciences means made by nature. Social sciences means made by man. So did all these constitution exist before we came? No. But these physics, chemistry and all existed before we came. That is made by nature. So that is the split. So whenever people are talking to you about natural sciences, social sciences, you don't have to worry. Anything made by man is social. Anything made by nature is natural. Correct? No. When I say it may sound very simple. But that's what the definition also means. Okay. Next. See, like I said, economics and education to improve human livelihoods and safeguard natural ecosystems. We have to safeguard natural ecosystems and develop our economies. That is what all international institutions will say. You don't have to worry at all. All institutions will say the same thing. Okay. And here again, see, what does it say? Sustainable development, sustainable environment, everything has to be sustainable. This is the continuous messaging that you will see. Okay. Okay. Now, under MAP program, we also have something called the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. I have already spoken about this. Like I said the 700 biosphere reserves in 120 countries. All of these are under MAB. Okay, the biosphere reserve is global in its nature. Now, it's not, from that time we have been talking only about forests, correct? I have been talking about this national park, that national park, this forest, that timber, this factory, that river. But it's not just about the forest. It's also about marine ecosystems. What is there under? Do we have an aerial ecosystem right now? No, we don't have aerial parks. But for aerial residents, we have Rangantittu, which is a wildlife sanctuary. But marine ecosystems can exist by themselves. One of the best examples is Gulf of Mannar. Where is Gulf of Mannar? Huh? South of Tamil Nadu, right? In the Indian Ocean, you have Gulf of Mannar. One of the best examples of marine ecosystems. Why? Ram Setu is there. So what? Why does it become marine ecosystem? Coral systems. Next, corals are one of the most how do you say? They have the highest concentration of life of anywhere in the planet. Rainforests are the same thing, highest concentration. You have coral reefs, very high concentration of life within that ecosystem, right? So it can be a terrestrial ecosystem, it can be a marine ecosystem. Both can come under a biosphere reserve. It is not necessarily only terrestrial, marine can also come. In fact, when I talk about biosphere reserves in India, I'll tell you. Okay, so what is the main aim? Integrate biodiversity conservation with sustainable development. This is what I've been telling. No, forest should also exist, we should also exist. How do you manage it? This is the equation that we are trying to answer. Now, biosphere reserves in India, like I said, 18 biosphere reserves, well recognized under MAB, and it is all about involving local communities to manage the entire environment. Okay. Okay, so examples of biosphere reserves in India, you have the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, you might have heard of it, Agastya Malai, Nanda Devi. Then you have Gulf of Mannar, like I said, that is also one biosphere reserve. What other examples do you know? Nilgiris, just here, Nilgiris is also a biosphere reserve, by the way, and protected under MAB. Why? Do you know why Nilgiris is so critical? Why it has to be given the status of a biosphere reserve under MAB, internationally recognized? Why? Okay, Nilgiris is not in Western Ghats, but you have half the answer. You have given half the answer. Why? Why is Nilgiris so important? Everywhere you are talking about Nilgiris. Nilgiris is also a brand. Why? There is a change, not climate change. There is a change. What is the change? You have Western Ghats, you have change. Nilgiris is literally the confluence of Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats. Okay, Eastern Ghats by itself is one kind of a biome. Western Ghats by itself is another kind of biome. These two are meeting to form a new biome there. Nilgiris by itself is a new biome. It has the qualities of both Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats. That's why it's so famous. Okay. One of the most important fauna of Nilgiris, which one? Tar. The Nilgiri tar. It is also called Nilgai. Nilgai. I don't know if you have seen Nilgai. Nilgai are huge, very big. It's like 6 feet and it will be this big, and you cannot go in front of it. It will come and hit you. It will look like a unicorn. It's like it will look like a cow. It will look like a horse, and you'll be confused about it. But that is only a Nilgai. First time you see a Nilgai, you'll wonder whether it's a horse or a cow. Okay. So Nilgai literally means blue cow. But why blue? It's actually a tinge of grey. It's not blue, but that's how it's being called. Okay. Yeah, Nilgiris, because it's blue mountains. Huh? Okay. Okay. IUCN. I think we have covered national park, wildlife sanctuaries, biospheres. I think everything, the concepts are clear. Now we can look at 3 important international things. One is IUCN. The second one we'll look at is RED, and the third one is RED plus. What does it mean? Questions are continuously coming regarding IUCN, RED and RED plus. What is IUCN full form? International Union for Conservation of Nature. So IUCN came about in 1948, and it is the global authority when it comes to conservation of species. What kind of species? But what kind of species? Those are categories. What you are talking about: endangered, critically threatened, critically endangered, threatened, vulnerable. These are categories. But what kind of species? No, all species can be categorized. I'll talk about that. We'll just answer these questions, okay? But IUCN lists out all the species, tells which are protected, which are to be protected, which are vulnerable, and then it also provides measures to safeguard them. Which is the most important book of IUCN? The Red Data book. What is the Red Data book? Endangered Animal List. We'll look at it now, okay? After this, we'll look at that. So if you have to look at the IUCN, think of IUCN as a worldwide doctor that is looking after the health of the planet, and it is looking at the different parts of the body, like the biome of rainforest is one part of the body, the flora and fauna inside it is another part of the body. The IUCN is like a doctor, and it is checking all the parts and saying, oh, this needs attention, that needs attention. Got it? No, that is the role of IUCN. The next one that we look at is RED. RED means reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. What is the difference between deforestation and degradation? Definitely these questions are a possibility, okay? These distinctions only you need to know, and that's why you need class, that's all. I mean, if there is information in a table, you can learn it. I don't need to be here. What is the distinction between deforestation and degradation? Okay, deforestation means removal of everything that is considered forest, because it is deforestation. Anything that is considered forest, you remove it. That is deforestation. What is degradation? Forest degradation. Not necessarily. Deforestation can be reducing the size of the forest. What is degradation? Pollution is one of an example. Very good. Pollution is an example of forest degradation. But what does degradation mean? Let's just answer that question. Now let's say my health is degrading. Have you heard people say this? My health is degrading. What does that mean? My health is falling. Correct? So when we say forest degradation, it means the health of the forest is falling. Okay, let's take an example. With the value. The overall health of the environment is reducing. That's what it means. Yes, the overall health of the environment is reducing. That's degradation. Let's take an example. I'm going to give you a very critical example here. We keep talking about saving tigers. Why? Top level predators. So what? Okay, let it get extinct. What is the problem? Let the tiger get extinct. Tiger is eating all the different animals. Why should the tiger survive? How will it maintain the ecosystem? There is always conflict between, like, balance between herbivores and carnivores should be there. Okay. So if the only deer is there in forest, then probably the plant level is reducing. Correct. So if the top level is like tiger and cheetah eating that deer, that will maintaining the balance of the forest. Precisely. This is exactly why top level predator is most important. I will explain it very simple language. Okay. Now we have to, people keep saying Project Tiger, Project Tiger, Project Tiger. We also have Project Elephant. We also have Project Vulture. Project Vulture is also very critical. Why? I will come to that. Very shortly I will come to that. But you don't get the kind of attention that Project Elephant, that Project Tiger gets for Project Elephant, right? Project Tiger is always hurt. Why? Why is the top level predator so important? And we'll talk with examples also. Like he said, the top level predator is key to maintaining balance. Nobody else in the food chain can maintain balance. Nobody else. The intermediary, for example, in a forest ecosystem, the autotrophs are what? The plants. Who eats the plants? The deer eats the plants. Now the plants cannot control the environment at all because they cannot move, they cannot do anything, they'll just keep growing. Now if the deer is not there, then what happens? The plants will keep growing and there will be no deer left. Next, if there is no deer, there is no tiger. Correct. So obviously if plant is growing, there has to be some kind of deer to make sure the deer is eating the plants and maintaining it at a sustainable level. Now if there are too many deer, what happens? It will eat all the plants. So new plants are not growing and eventually the deer population will start dying out. How? Because there is no plant, there is no food, the food scarcity, it is going to die down. Now for deer population to maintain, what needs to be there? The top level predator needs to be there. What is the top level predator? It's a tiger. I mean, it can also be a leopard, but in India it is tiger. Tiger is the top level predator because tigers kill leopards also. So now these tigers are going and eating the deer and the numbers get managed. Now if the tigers are dwindling in numbers, that is if the tigers are reducing in numbers, what happens? The deer population will explode. If deer population explodes, the forest begins to degrade. How? Because it is eating, overgrazing, it is eating all the autotrophs. That means the forest is getting degraded. So this is an example of forest degradation. Pollution, you said, very good example of forest degradation. Now humans come there and let's say we start dumping our waste there. Absolute soil pollution. What happens if there is soil pollution? Autotrophs won't grow, that is plants won't grow. Correct. Plants won't grow, that means soil is degrading. So these are examples of forest degradation. Similarly, like let's say we go start cutting down all the trees. What is happening? Forest degradation. I mean, it can also be deforestation, but let's say out of 100 trees I cut down 50 trees. It's not absolute deforestation, it's partial deforestation, but it actually results in degradation of the health of the forest. So that is the distinction between deforestation and forest degradation. A reduction in the overall health of the forest environment is degradation. Deforestation means removing the forest or deforesting. Okay. Okay. Now red, we'll come back to that. Red was an instrument that was designed by the developed nations. Okay, mainly for their own happiness and their own purpose. What they told developing countries like Brazil, for example, best example is Brazil. They went and told Brazil, among other developing countries, that don't cut your forests. We will give you money. Just don't cut your forests. Okay, just for maintaining your forest, we will give you money, they said. But of course, they didn't pay. That's a different story. This was the concept of red. Why should developing countries, why did the developed countries not want developing countries to cut down their forests? Why? That is a bigger problem, right? They didn't want the developing countries to have industries. That's a secondary issue. Just let's look at it from an environment point of view now. Global warming. The forests are a source of carbon sink. The forests absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen. So the more carbon that is emitted from developed countries, if there are lots of forests in developing countries, it will suck it in. That is the whole concept. Now in developed countries, the number of forest ranges are reduced. Correct. For example, let's say in US, they have huge areas under reserve. That's all. All the other places have been cut down and it has been converted into urban areas. Now, let's say Brazil, Amazon forest is literally called as the lungs of earth. Have you heard? It's called as the lungs of the earth. Now, Brazil and Paraguay, Uruguay, all of these people together, they had a plan to start clearing Amazon forests for natural resources that is there under the earth and for timber value and for medicinal properties of plants that may exist there. So in that way, they can develop their pharma industry, because you get medicinal plants and medicinal value. They can develop different cottage industries, and that will help the communities there, and that will help them grow better. So exploiting natural resources is key for economic growth of any country. Right? Wrong? Right. Now, critical resource for countries, that is for least developed countries, as they call, like Brazil or India or Africa, for example. Now, let's say Congo. For us, unless we exploit our natural resources, we cannot build industry. Until we build industry, we cannot have any economic growth. So, the moment these people are saying, don't cut down your forests, how will we develop industries? How will we develop industries? It becomes difficult. These are the questions that these countries ask the developed nations. If we don't exploit our natural resources, how will we develop? So the developed nation said, oh, we will give you some money so that you don't have to worry about it. And then they didn't pay. That's a different question. Okay. So financial incentives to developing countries so that global emissions are reduced by making sure that huge rainforest ecosystems and such ecosystems are conserved. This is RED. Okay. So RED includes a compensation for keeping their forests standing and not cutting them down, because forests act as carbon sinks. Now RED plus. What is RED plus? RED, obviously they didn't pay money. So again, these people said we are going to cut it down, and in Amazon, parts of the Amazon forest, Brazil started mining. So they came up with another idea called RED plus. They said, not only for the forests you have, but if you plant more forests, we will give you more money. That is RED plus. It is the next level scheme. So you keep the forests that you have and you plant more forests, and we will give you more money, they said. So this is RED plus. Understood? That's all. Very simple. There cannot be simpler explanations. This is the simplest explanation. Okay. So we were talking about IUCN. Okay. What's the time? We'll continue. Huh? Okay. Okay. We were talking about the IUCN. And we said the most important book from IUCN is the Red Data book. What is the Red Data book? It is also called as the IUCN Red List. It is also called as the Red List of Threatened Species. Okay. Now, the Red Data book, I asked you, what does it contain? You said it contains this animal, that animal. Correct. What did you say? But it's not just animal. What did I say? I said it is about environment. It looks at the entire environment. It's like a global doctor that is looking at all the parts. That means it is looking at animals, it is looking at plants, it is looking at fungi, etc. Everything that is biotic in that environment. What does it mean, biotic in that environment? Means anything that is living in that environment and which is important to that environment. Red Data book will look at it. Okay. It will start listing everything, then it will categorize. That is all it does. List, categorize. What is another important function of IUCN? It will also provide solutions. Okay, it will also provide measures. Solutions means measures, that's all. But it will not implement it, only suggesting. Okay, implementation has to be done by the countries. Understood? It can be national government, state government, whatever it is, with respect to those countries. Now, categories, species are categorized based on the conservation status from least concern to extinct. Now, let's say dogs. Least concern. She is not at all worried about dogs. Now, what about species that are extinct? Give me one example of extinct Indian species. Two-horned rhino is extinct now. Huh? Okay, I don't know. Okay, two-horned Indian rhino, Assam, extinct. I think one was remaining, male, in Kaziranga only. Cheetah is extinct. Cheetah became extinct in 1948. Indian cheetah is the best example of an extinct species. 1948. Again, you have pink-headed duck that is also extinct. Okay,